a standing session here, only partially because we have 3 chairs. So the town halls earlier, Ben, you and Paul were both in the tech town hall, but you're closest to me, so I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
What was the biggest sort of surprise or aha or takeaway that you had from it?
Sure. We had some healthy debates and some healthy conversation. Some of the 2 biggest highlights that I think worth mentioning right now would be a lot of the strategies behind private marketplace structure. We're seeing eclectic mixes, direct deals going secondary, where traditionally they might be housed first in a taxonomy and hierarchy. And basically just got viewpoints from a variety of vendors and what they're seeing and how they're seeing it structured. And basically,
what were the debates about?
The debates are more about the next topic I'm going to bring up.
This is a segue.
Yeah, and the debates would be mostly about fragmentation, right? In the industry, operating teams are moving in and out of UIs and reporting systems, and the debate was if that's a good thing, if that's a bad thing, and we got deeper into about the monopolization of possibly working with one big vendor as opposed to being agnostic across a variety of vendors.
Okay, ad tech independence.
There was another debate, which was the digital seller going away? And it was a little bit controversial, but I think the conclusion was that the digital seller is not going away, but the digital seller is changing. A lot of publishers and ad tech outfits and others are hiring people now that are both doing programmatic as well as the kind of more traditional sale. And the prevailing thought was that the type of seller that was prevalent maybe the last 10 years is going to be a little different, a little sort of savvier, a little bit more schizophrenic maybe than they've been in the past. So that was
explain savvier and schizophrenic.
I was using some alliteration, Brian. I didn't know there would be a follow-up question on that. So savvier in the sense that it's a different sell, right? If you're just blocking and tackling, selling sponsorships, that's a very linear sell. If you need to understand the dynamics of the technology and work with companies like Spot Exchange and others to figure that out, those are 2 different right now skill sets, and that's why they're schizophrenic.
Okay, well, you see, you handled it with a plume. Jason, I was actually in this too. Some pretty interesting discussions particularly around viewability. Viewability, I was a little bit surprised. I thought it would be a big issue, but it seemed like it was a really big issue.
What were you most surprised by?
Well, I mean, just that I know that it's a mess, but I'm asking the questions here too. Now I'm uncomfortable. No, that I knew
I always
it was
want to interview Brian.
We totally didn't rehearse that part. No, I knew it was a bit of a mess for publishers, but I was surprised at sort of the level, I guess, of agita, if you will.
Yeah. The agita is rising, which is interesting. Every time I get into a discussion on viewability, it's something that very clearly from the beginning, the shift to viewability was always a topic that premium publishers in particular and publishers thought it would be a good thing ultimately for the industry, but the transition there is absolutely
So is a good idea currently poorly implemented?
Right. And so who's to blame? It's lots of people on all sides. But the problem and the frustration, I think, is growing because everybody wants to get there, but there's issues, and that's what we heard in the room, there's issues with the vendor technology, just consistent measurability with viewability. There's issues with the pricing, which we can only talk a little bit about, but the fact that if you're going to shift to a viewable currency, you expect to get paid more for the ads, and that's not happening. And then there's issues with certain, as publishers, there's issues with certain people on the buy side that are just causing mass confusion by not sticking to the standard. And that's agitating people because the standard is the standard.
So, Paul and Ben, did viewability come up at all? And if so, what were the discussions around?
It definitely came up. The idea of, again, an agnostic approach came up because there's varying metrics and different recordings as to success in campaign with different vendors in the viewability world. So it seemed that the vendors that we spoke to really touted an agnostic approach, and that being the most strategic way to tackle it.
Okay. Paul?
Another interesting thing that came up, and I'd love to get your perspective on it, is the idea that it's starting to look like there's going to be a handful of companies that are going to be sort of controlling the tech stack, right? You know, the recent acquisitions by Facebook, Google, and others. Did that come up in the publisher session? And generally speaking, how do publishers feel about that?
Yeah, it came up just in a limited sense from the issue of fragmentation and trying to handle all these different supply chains, because it doesn't work well if you can't do something consistently. You can't really scale your business, and there's really divergence happening across all these devices. I hear it more from publishers out in the marketplace more than I heard in the room with the issue of, my life would be a lot simpler if I could just work with one company rather than having to work with more and more companies than the LumaScape. So one company could solve these issues for me. They probably could make it even more financially better for me in terms of my margin, so less money leaks from the marketer, between the marketer and the publisher.
But then wouldn't publishers say, oh, but Google has too much power?
So they like that, but I can,
Now that we have
I'm the
one
voice of
company
reason to
equals
say, as the trade association, say that's absolutely nuts. You don't want one company or two companies to own the entire supply chain.
I think all the ad tech companies in the room would be happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Unless Google buys them, and then they'll change them.
Then they don't care.
Yeah. The other thing was mobile. Mobile came up quite a bit, like some publisher. Obviously, no one's real happy with the mobile ad rates and where they are right now. And I don't know, Jason, what was your takeaway from that?
There was a little bit of debate between, is it an attribution issue? And what that attribution is. It's certainly not a good world where it's just the click, but Facebook's in the best position right now, it seems, on the attribution side, and the publishers have a weak spot there. And then there's a debate between that versus, is it a creative issue? Are the ad sizes, the units, what's out there right now, really what we need in the marketplace? Yeah.
And there was, I remember one publisher was talking about how much you really want to sacrifice the user experience for, high impact creative. It's a different ballgame in mobile. Did mobile come up much at the tech?
Yeah, it certainly did, and we discussed a lot of the attribution philosophies as well. Maybe the metric of cost per install might not be the most accurate way to go. Maybe it is. There were differing sides of the fence on that. And there's lack of standardization, which continuously comes up, regardless of execution, mobile or not.
Right. So the final thing that I thought was very interesting from that sort of percolated a little bit, but I've seen it over there on the challenge board, is around ad blocking. This seems like one of those, if I was to say, the viewability of 2016, it seems like an issue that I know we do events we publish in Europe too, and it is a much bigger deal for German publishers, for instance, and for Scandinavian publishers than it seems here. But I'm seeing more publishers talk about ad blocking as not a nuisance, but a major problem.
Huge problem. Yeah, and I think in the next year it's going to hit a tipping point, and what you see is a generational shift where the highest penetration of ad blocking is in the 21 to 29-year-olds, 18 to 29-year-olds, and so it's coming as these people get older, and they turn it on by default, ad blocking. So your ads are all being stripped out, and we've seen research that shows 40% of 18 to 29-year-olds are using ad blocking software. So just think about what's coming, and the solutions are not good solutions. They're either you block those users from using your product, which in my experience, it's never a good idea to block users, period, from using your product, or you use a network to try to hack into that inventory, or you try to run them out of business, and then somebody else is going to come along and fill that void. So there's not a good solution.
Yeah, and did that come up at all? Probably not an issue there.
It did. It came up briefly as possibly an issue that could cause a stumbling block with programmatic in general. We didn't discuss it deeply, though.
Okay, it's a threat to the ecosystem. Awesome. So, Jason, Paul, Ben, thank you so much. Appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, and now I want